Welcome to Sophia's Forbidden Desires, where the lines between passion and temptation blur, and the heat of unspoken desires ignites a fire that can't be contained. If you crave stories that defy boundaries, stories dripping with intensity and raw, unfiltered emotion, then don't hesitate. Subscribe now and let the thrill consume you. Like, comment, and share if you're ready to dive into a tale that will steal your breath and haunt your thoughts long after it's over. Trust me, this one will leave you breathless. For years, I had locked away the parts of me that craved intimacy, buried beneath layers of denial, self-discipline, and a hollow routine. I never imagined I would find myself here, teetering on the edge of a temptation so forbidden, so consuming, it both terrified and exhilarated me. It wasn't just that I was aching for touch. It was an almost desperate hunger for something I hadn't tasted in over a decade. 10 years of lonely nights spent in the cold comfort of solitude, of fingertips tracing the curve of my own skin, but never feeling truly alive. Each evening, I told myself that my fantasies would have to be enough, that my body could endure the emptiness, but it was all a lie. The truth was, I was breaking. And then he appeared, Jake, my son's best friend. A young man with a presence so undeniable, so full of vitality, that it felt as if the very air shifted when he entered the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an aura of effortless strength. He was the kind of man who didn't just command attention. He took it. Every inch of him seemed sculpted from a desire I could no longer suppress. His arms toned and powerful, his chest firm and muscular, and those abs, oh those abs, that I couldn't help but notice each time he wiped away sweat, his shirt lifting just enough to tease me. At first I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was nothing but harmless admiration, until I could no longer ignore the craving that was rising inside me, a hunger so powerful it eclipsed every ounce of reason. With each passing week, I found myself stealing glances, lingering longer than necessary. His smile, his laugh, the way he moved. Everything about him made my heart beat faster and my pulse race. I had never felt so alive, so consumed by something so utterly forbidden. It was a slow burn, a pull that started deep within me, igniting an ache I didn't know how to extinguish. It was as though the universe had conspired to bring us together, as though I had been waiting for this moment, this young man, to shatter the walls I had so carefully built around my heart. I couldn't stop the pull, the yearning, the need for him. It all began one sweltering summer afternoon, the kind where the sun seems to scorch everything in its path, leaving the air thick and heavy, suffocating in its heat. My son had left for the weekend, leaving me alone with my thoughts, and Jake. The house felt eerily quiet without his presence, yet there was something that made the silence seem charged, as if the air itself was brimming with unspoken possibilities. I had just finished stepping out of a long, soothing shower, the warm water still clinging to my skin as I wrapped myself in nothing but the smooth, cool embrace of a silk robe. The fabric slid against my body like a second skin, offering a delicate comfort that was both sensual and indulgent. I was lost in the moment, still caught in the aftermath of the shower's release, when I heard a soft knock on my bedroom door. "Mrs. Carter," came Jake's voice, hesitant yet undeniably familiar. Your AC isn't working. Mind if I borrow a fan?" His words, simple as they were, sent a shockwave through my already tender nerves. I hesitated, my heart racing as a strange fluttering sensation curled deep within me. I knew I should refuse. I should send him away, remind him that it wasn't appropriate for him to be here, in my space, at this hour. But my mind was clouded with a fog I couldn't shake, one that whispered that maybe, just maybe, I wanted him to stay. "Come in," I called, my voice betraying me. It was softer than I intended, more inviting than it should have been. The door creaked open and Jake stepped inside. My breath caught in my throat as my eyes immediately locked onto him. He was standing there, drenched in the humidity of the day. His shirt plastered to his chest, outlining every muscle, every curve of his toned body. I could feel the heat of his presence in the room. His dark eyes searching mine with an intensity one couldn't understand, yet couldn't ignore. It was like something had shifted in the space between us, something both thrilling and dangerous. For a long moment, we simply stood there, the only sound the faint hum of the ceiling fan. My robe had slipped slightly, the edge of the fabric pulling apart just enough to expose the curve of my thigh, the bare skin glowing softly in the dim light. His gaze flickered, and in that instant I felt it. A jolt, an undeniable spark between us. It was as if time itself had stopped, leaving just the two of us suspended in this charged, intimate moment. I should have tightened the knot around my waist. I should have pulled the robe closed and told him to leave. But I didn't. Couldn't. Instead, I leaned against the dresser, deliberately letting the robe slide a little further down my shoulder, revealing just a sliver of skin, just enough to tease both him and myself. "It's so hot today," I murmured, my voice trembling just slightly as I spoke, my eyes not leaving his. Jake swallowed hard, his throat working in a slow, visible motion, and I could see the effect I was having on him. His hands twitched at his sides, fingers curling into fists as if he were struggling to maintain control, to keep his distance. But I could feel the pull between us, undeniable and magnetic. The tension in the room thickened, crackling like static in the air. His breath came out in uneven, shaky bursts, and I knew. He was fighting it. Fighting the desire that I had awakened in him, the same hunger that had taken root in me. I could almost hear the battle in his mind, the internal war waging between what he should do and what he desperately wanted. The space between us seemed to shrink, inch by inch, until he stepped closer, just close enough that I could smell him. The faint scent of his sweat mixed with his cologne, a heady combination that made my pulse quicken. It was intoxicating, and as he neared, I could feel my body responding in ways I couldn't control. I looked up at him, my heart hammering in my chest, my body screaming for something forbidden, something I knew I shouldn't want, but couldn't seem to stop yearning for. The moment everything changed, the very moment I knew we had crossed a line that neither of us could come back from, was when he stepped into my space, so close now that I could feel the heat radiating off his skin. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the battle between restraint and longing, and it made me ache even more. I was no longer just a woman in a robe. I was a woman on the edge of giving in, ready to surrender to the magnetic pull that had been building between us for weeks. It was dangerous. It was reckless. And it was all I could think about. "Jake," I whispered, my voice low and almost unrecognizable as I trailed my fingers lightly over his arm. The heat of his skin was like an electric current, sending a shiver through my body as I let my touch linger, barely brushing against him. His muscles tensed under my fingers, a tremor of desire running through him that I couldn't ignore. I was acutely aware of the closeness between us, the raw intensity in the air, and the way my pulse quickened with every breath I took. I couldn't stop myself now, even if I wanted to. "You don't have to go just yet," I added, my words so soft, so seductive in their own way. It was an invitation, unspoken but clear. It felt like the very moment the universe held its breath, suspended in time. And for the first time in years, I could feel the walls I had built around myself crumbling away, piece by piece. His breath hitched sharply, his jaw clenching with such force that I could see the muscles working under his skin. "Mrs. Carter," he rasped, his voice thick, strained with the conflict raging within him. "We shouldn't." The words came out in a broken whisper, as though he was trying to convince both of us, but his body was telling a different story. I could see it in the way his chest rose and fell with each ragged breath, in the way his body shifted ever so slightly toward mine as if it were pulling him closer against his will. I could feel the hunger radiating off him, and in that moment, I knew we were standing at the edge of something irreversible. I took a step closer, my body drawn to him like a magnet. My lips hovered just inches from his, so close that I could feel his breath warm against my skin. His eyes locked onto mine, dark and full of yearning, a storm of desire swirling within them. This was the point of no return, the moment where everything changed, where everything became possible. There was no going back now. His breath was heavy, his chest rising and falling as though he were fighting a war within himself, one that he was losing. I could feel the tension in the air, thick with longing and restraint. "Mrs. Carter," he murmured again, his fingers twitching at his sides, as though he wanted to reach out and touch me, but was struggling to control the urge. That hesitation, that fight against what was inevitable, only made the heat between us grow. It made me want him more. I closed the distance between us, my robe slipping further off my shoulder, revealing the smooth, soft curve of my bare skin. The action was slow, deliberate, teasing. I watched his eyes darken, a flash of something feral flickering in their depths as I moved closer. "Say my name," I whispered, my lips now barely a breath away from his. The closeness made my heart race, my body alive with the anticipation of what was to come. His jaw clenched tighter, his breath caught in his throat. His eyes flickered with desire, but there was a moment's hesitation before he finally gave in. "Lisa," he breathed, his voice ragged, the word falling from his lips like a prayer, a confession, a surrender. That was it. That was the moment. In that instant I felt the world around us disappear. There was nothing but him and me, and the undeniable pull that had drawn us together. I reached up, my fingers tracing the firm ridges of his stomach, feeling the taut tension under my touch. His body was on fire, hot to the touch, each muscle trembling under my fingertips. He sucked in a sharp breath, and I could feel the way his whole body tightened in response, the very air between us thick with the pressure of the moment. I let my fingers slowly trace a teasing line down his chest, feeling the raw tension of his body coil tighter with each movement. His words were caught in his throat, but I could hear the ragged sound of his breathing, the struggle to maintain control. "Jake," I murmured, my voice low and thick with need, as I tilted my head slightly to the side, my eyes locked onto his. "Do you want this?" The question hung in the air, charged with the intensity of everything we had been skirting around, everything we had been denying. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his body rigid, like he was holding himself back from something that could shatter both of us. But then, something inside him snapped, and in an instant, his resistance was gone. With a low growl, he surged forward, his hands gripping my waist, pulling me into him with such force that I gasped. The heat of his body consumed me, melted all the restraint I had left. My heart slammed painfully against my ribs, each beat an erratic rhythm as his lips hovered just inches from mine, teasing me with the promise of what was to come. I could feel the desperation in him, in the way his breath brushed over my skin, and I knew, this was the moment where everything changed. There was no turning back now. His breath was hot against my skin, ragged and uneven, the air between us thick with the weight of what we both knew was inevitable. His body was taut with restraint, as though every fiber of him was fighting against the overwhelming urge to give in completely. "I've wanted you for so long," he whispered, his voice rough, raw with the hunger he could no longer contain. The words were laced with a need so deep, it sent a shiver racing down my spine. I had always known there was something there between us, but hearing him say it, feeling the intensity in his tone, shattered every remaining wall of caution I had left. I gasped, the sound escaping my lips as if it was ripped from me by the force of his touch. His hand, once hesitant, now moved with a boldness that left me breathless. His finger skimmed up my thigh, the cool touch of his skin against mine sending a wave of heat crashing through me. As he pushed aside the silk of my robe, his grip became firm, possessive, like he was claiming me in a way that made my entire body ache with need. There was no going back now. "Jake," I breathed, my voice a desperate plea, a whisper of surrender. And then, without warning, his lips crashed down on mine. The kiss was nothing like any kiss I had ever known. Hungry, desperate, reckless. It was as if he had been starving for this moment, for me, and he couldn't hold back anymore. I responded without hesitation, my hands tangling in his thick, dark hair, pulling him closer, feeling the heat of his body press against mine. The world outside of us ceased to exist. There was nothing but the frantic pulse of our bodies, the urgency of our touch. His hands roamed over me, exploring, claiming, as if he had waited a lifetime for this. I moaned into his mouth, the sound raw and unrestrained, and arched into him, needing more. More of him, more of this. My body was alive in a way I hadn't felt in so long, each touch lighting a fire deep inside me that I thought had been long extinguished. His breath caught, a shaky sound escaping him. "We shouldn't be doing this," he murmured against my lips, but even as he said the words, his hands didn't stop, didn't pull away. They only tightened their grip, pushing me closer, urging me to lose myself in him. I didn't care about the consequences anymore. I didn't care about anything except the feeling of him, the sensation of his hands on my skin, the taste of him on my lips. For the first time in 10 long, lonely years, I finally felt alive, truly alive in a way I hadn't even realized I was missing. The aching, empty parts of me that had been starved for so long were finally being filled. It was like a dam had broken, and all the emotion, the desire, the need flooded me at once. The morning after, or so I thought, I woke up with a jolt, my body still humming with the lingering traces of his touch. My skin was hypersensitive, every inch of me still tingling with the memory of the night before. I could still taste him on my lips, could still feel the press of his body against mine. But as I stretched in the bed, searching for the warmth that had once surrounded me, my heart skipped a beat. The bed was empty. Jake was gone. For a long moment, I lay there, my chest rising and falling in frantic breaths, my mind spinning as I tried to make sense of what had happened. The room was silent, the only sound the steady thrum of my heartbeat. I replayed every single moment of the night before, the way his hands had explored every inch of me, the way his lips had devoured mine, the way he had worshipped my body as though he had been waiting forever to do it. I had felt everything, every touch, every kiss, every shudder of desire, and yet now, in the harsh light of morning, everything felt different. Reality crashed into me like a cold wave. What had we done? What had I done? I had surrendered to the moment, to the craving, to the heat between us. But now, with the absence of his body beside me, with the stark emptiness of the bed, the weight of our actions settled heavily on my chest. There was no denying it. We had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure how to go back from this. What had started as a fleeting temptation now felt like something far more complicated, far more dangerous. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if I could ever truly go back to the way things were before Jake had ignited something inside me. The forbidden temptation returned with a force that made my heart race. Just as I was about to slip from the warmth of the bed, my fingers brushing against the soft sheets as I tried to collect myself, I heard it, a sound that made my body freeze. A noise in the stillness of the room. Footsteps, light but deliberate, echoing through the quiet hallway. My breath caught in my throat as the door creaked open slowly, the sound carrying a weight I couldn't ignore. There, standing in the doorway, was Jake. Shirtless, his body glistening with the sheen of sweat from a run. Every muscle of his toned chest was outlined against the dim light of the morning, his skin shimmering with a barely contained intensity. His dark eyes, usually so guarded, locked onto mine with a hunger that sent a jolt of desire straight through me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't look away. He was everything I had been trying to forget, and everything I had been craving in the shadows of my mind. "I went for a run," he said, his voice low and rough, carrying the edge of something deeper, something more urgent than I had anticipated. Needed to clear my head. I swallowed hard, my heart hammering in my chest as I tried to keep my composure, but my gaze couldn't help but fall over the powerful expanse of his body. His abs flexing as he moved, every inch of him exuding strength and vitality. I felt a wave of longing rush through me, crashing over my senses. "Did it work?" I asked, my voice coming out softer than I meant it to, almost a whisper, a question that felt more like an invitation. Jake exhaled sharply, the breath escaping him as if he had been holding it in. He stepped closer, his feet moving with a purpose I couldn't deny, and before I could process what was happening, he had closed the door behind him. The sound of the click felt like the moment the world around us went silent. Nothing but the two of us left in the room, surrounded by the electric charge between us that had been building for days, for weeks, maybe even longer. "No," he rasped, barely giving me the chance to react before he was on me again. His hands were on me, gripping my waist with a force that spoke of desperation, of a need so raw and primal that it shook me to the core. His lips found mine in an instant, crashing onto them with an urgency I could feel deep in my bones. I lost myself in the heat of it, the passion of it, the recklessness of it. His body pressed against mine with such force that the world outside us vanished, and all that existed was the fire of our connection. I moaned against his lips, my body arching into him as he pinned me against the wall. I felt every inch of him, his chest against mine, his muscles flexing, his heat searing through my skin. The room, the air, everything around us was consumed by the intensity of what we were doing. There was no more hesitation, no more thinking. There was only us, tangled in a whirlwind of desire, of need, of something so forbidden yet undeniable. "I can't stop thinking about you," Jake admitted, his voice barely above a whisper as he trailed his lips down my neck, his breath hot against my skin, sending shivers through my entire body. "Tell me you don't regret it." Regret. The word struck me, but it didn't land the way he expected. Regret. Well, had no regrets. I wasn't sure when the last time I had felt truly alive was, but now, right now, with his hands on me and his lips burning mine, I was awake in a way I hadn't been in years. Regret. I breathed, my fingers tracing the hard lines of his chest, feeling the tension that coiled beneath his skin, the heat that radiated from him like a furnace. I teased his jaw with my lips, inching closer to the tantalizing line of his mouth. "I don't regret a single second." His grip tightened, his hands almost bruising against my skin as he pulled me closer, his control slipping away like sand through fingers. His breath came in ragged bursts, his body betraying the restraint he had tried so desperately to hold onto. "Good," he growled, his voice dark and guttural with need. "Because I'm not done with you yet." And just like that, we were consumed by it. This fire, this irresistible pull between us that had been smoldering for far too long. The hesitation was gone. We were past the point of no return, and neither of us cared. He kissed me again, his lips like fire, urgent, burning with a desire that matched my own. His hands were rough yet tender as they dug into my hips, pulling me against him, backing me deeper into the wall. My body was alive with the intensity of it, with the feel of his hands exploring me, claiming me, as though this moment was the culmination of everything we had been fighting against. His body pressed into mine, the heat of him searing through the fabric that separated us, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I needed him. I needed this. And so, without another thought, I gave myself to him fully, surrendering to the fire that had been ignited between us. It was reckless. It was dangerous. But in that moment, nothing else mattered but the wild, unrestrained passion we shared, unspoken, unapologetic. His touch was raw with need, his urgency matching the fire coursing through my veins. Every inch of him pressed against me, solid and unyielding, a stark reminder of the raw hunger burning in both of us. I could feel the hard outline of him through the fabric of his jeans, each beat of my pulse syncing with the heat he radiated. His breath, shallow and frantic, came in ragged gasps against my lips, his voice hoarse and desperate. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his words almost a prayer, a trembling plea against the storm that was rising between us. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Instead, I tangled my fingers in the thick strands of his dark hair, pulling him closer, kneading him with an intensity that bordered on frantic. My lips parted, my tongue slipping into his mouth in a slow, sinful dance, our kiss deepening with a kind of desperate passion that made my heart race in my chest. His groan was a low, guttural sound that resonated through my very core, igniting a fire in places I'd long buried. A shiver coursed through me, and I pressed myself even closer, as though I could erase the distance between us entirely. "Lila!" He breathed my name, his voice ragged with the weight of his desire. My name, wrapped in the intensity of his yearning, felt like both a prayer and a curse in that moment, one that bound us in something that went far beyond what either of us had planned. In a haze of heated desire, I led him to my bedroom, the sound of our ragged breaths filling the air as I fumbled to close the door behind us. My heart pounded so loudly in my ears that I could barely hear his footsteps as he stalked toward me. And then, the second that door clicked shut, his hands were everywhere. On my hips, under my shirt. The swift movement of his fingers peeling away the fabric of my clothing made me tremble, exposing parts of me I had longed to keep hidden. But Jake worshipped me in a way no one ever had. He didn't look at me with the typical gaze of hunger or possessiveness. No, his eyes were filled with something deeper. Reverence. "You're so beautiful," he breathed, his lips trailing down the curve of my neck, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. My breath hitched, and I tilted my head back, giving him more access as his mouth wandered lower. I gasped when he reached the curve of my collarbone, then further still. His tongue, warm and insistent, dipped lower, and I arched my back instinctively, giving myself up to him completely. His lips found the most intimate places of my skin, and I couldn't hold back the shudder that racked through me as he took me in his mouth, his touch unrelenting. The pleasure surged through me in waves, a sensation I had never experienced before. My hands fumbled at the sheets beneath me, my nails digging in as though holding onto anything I could to keep me from flying apart. "Jake," I choked out, my voice breaking with need, the word a desperate plea as I gripped the bed in a futile attempt to ground myself. But he didn't let up. He wouldn't stop. His tongue was relentless, and soon I was trembling beneath him, my body giving way to the sensations that had been building inside me for what felt like an eternity. Then, with a wicked grin, his lips left me with a searing promise. He moved above me, positioning himself in a way that made my heart stutter, and when he finally entered me, it was as if time itself paused. He filled me completely, perfectly, as though we were two puzzle pieces meant to fit together in this very moment. And when I gasped, sobbed his name into the darkness that surrounded us, I knew that there was no turning back. We moved together, frantic, desperate. Our bodies collided with a rhythm born from raw need, the bed creaking under the weight of our passion. Every thrust was a confession, a surrender to something we both knew was dangerous. But in that moment, neither of us cared. We were lost in the fire, in the sin we couldn't escape. When I shattered beneath him, when the world exploded in flashes of heat and light, it was as though everything I had ever known was rewritten. His groan, deep and guttural, followed me over the edge, and for that fleeting moment, I was his completely. The world outside ceased to exist, and it was only Jake, only the two of us, tangled in this reckless dance. But when the storm passed, when our bodies finally stilled, I knew that this secret, this forbidden fire between us, could never remain hidden. It was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. What would we do then? Could we keep this heat alive without being consumed by it? Or would guilt, the weight of what we had done, tear us apart? 1 year later, the letter arrived on a Tuesday. "Dear Mrs. Carter, we regret to inform you that your son, Daniel, has formally withdrawn consent for any contact." The letter was stamped with the university's embossed seal, its weight pressing into my chest with a heaviness that made my breath catch. I didn't even need to finish reading it. The words were clear enough, scalding in their finality. My fingers trembled as I set the paper down on the kitchen counter, a place that had once been sacred to me. The same counter where Jake and I had shared our first kiss, where we'd crossed a line, innocent at first but soon irreversible. That night, we had ignited something neither of us knew how to extinguish. The memories of it hit me like a tidal wave. The soft brush of his lips, the way the kitchen light had cast a warm glow around us as our hearts raced in unison, and the way he held me as if the world outside that room didn't exist. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt dense, heavy, suffocating. I couldn't escape the weight of everything we had lost, everything we had sacrificed. A warm hand settled gently on my shoulder, grounding me in the present. "Hey!" Jake's voice, deeper than I remembered, echoed in the silence. It had taken me months to get used to how much it had changed. The boy I once knew had become a man in those stolen months we had together. "You okay?" I turned into his embrace, letting his warmth envelop me, as if his arms could erase the shame, the guilt, the ache in my heart. His scent was the same: pine trees and that cheap cologne he refused to outgrow, the one that reminded me of our first nights together, of reckless, desperate love. He'd moved across the country to be with me. For this mess. And I loved him more for it, even as the ghosts of my mistakes haunted me. "The truth is sitting between us like a third person in the room," I whispered into his chest. The familiar thump of his heart under my cheek was comforting, but it couldn't erase the sharp sting of reality. His arms tightened around me, pulling me closer as if he could shield me from the ache. "I know," Jake murmured, his voice raw with emotion. His hands smoothed over my back, trying to erase the tremors running through me, but they couldn't stop the tears threatening to fall. He had never said it, never spoken the words, but he knew. He always knew. Flashback 3 months after that first night. The confrontation had come in a rush, unexpected and brutal. Daniel's voice, cracked with the weight of heartbreak, sliced through the air like glass shattering. "You disgust me," he spat, his words sharp and bitter, cutting into me. He was supposed to be a man now, but the hurt in his eyes made him look like a teenager again, vulnerable and betrayed. "My best friend, seriously, Mom?" The duffel bag at his feet was already packed, the zipper barely holding together the life he was about to walk away from. He was leaving me, leaving everything we'd ever known. I reached out, but he recoiled, the distance between us growing wider with each passing second. "Daniel, please," I pleaded, my voice trembling with the weight of everything unsaid. "It wasn't planned. It wasn't." But he didn't let me finish. His eyes, his father's eyes, burned with betrayal, and I couldn't tell if it was the love of a son for his mother or the unrelenting anger of a child whose trust had been shattered beyond repair. Was he justified? Could I ever explain the unexplainable? Present day. The moment between us stretched out, suspended in time. Jake's forehead pressed against mine, his breath mingling with mine. "We could reach out," he said softly, his voice edged with hope, the kind of hope I knew we couldn't afford. "Try again. Maybe he'll forgive us." I studied him, the man who had broken me and rebuilt me with pieces of himself. The laugh lines around his eyes, reminders of our stolen weekends at the lake, the scar on his collarbone from the reckless night we'd spent in the kitchen, the night I couldn't forget, no matter how hard I tried. He still looked at me as if I hung the moon, even when I felt like the villain in this story. His eyes, filled with unconditional love, clashed with the guilt gnawing at me from the inside. "No," I whispered, tracing the line of his jaw, feeling the roughness of his skin beneath my fingertips. Some fires burn too hot to put out. The doorbell rang, interrupting the fragile moment we had left. Jake frowned, his body stiffening slightly, his hand dropping from my back. "You expecting someone?" But I wasn't. And for a brief moment, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, it was the universe reminding us that the past wasn't ready to let us go. I wasn't expecting him. But when I opened the door, I found myself face to face with a past I thought I had buried. There he stood, in a wrinkled suit that looked like it hadn't seen a dry cleaner in years, holding a bouquet of wilting daisies. The same kind he had brought on our first date, 22 years ago, in a quaint little cafe where the air smelled like vanilla and hope. The flowers, once bright and full of promise, now drooped in his hand, as if they too had lost their vibrancy over the years. "Hi, Lisa." His voice cracked on my name, tentative, as though he wasn't sure if I would even recognize him. His smile was small, almost apologetic, but there was an unmistakable warmth in it, a tenderness that had once made my heart beat a little faster. Behind him, the moving van sat idle at the curb, its doors open, as though waiting for him to make his decision. And then there was Jake. His presence pressed against my back like an invisible storm, a tension I could feel without having to look. I didn't need to turn around to see the way his body had gone rigid, the way his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his knuckles turning white. His breath came in short, sharp bursts, and I could feel the anger simmering just beneath the surface. He was a man of passion, of heat, a fire that burned so brightly it could scorch everything in its path. But in front of me, my ex-husband, Daniel's father, stood with a quiet kind of sorrow. He was the man I had once built a life with, the man I had once loved, even though that love had faded long ago, like a photograph left too long in the sun. He was the man I had chosen to leave, to walk away from, but who still held pieces of me in his hands, pieces I wasn't sure I was ready to give up. As the autumn leaves swirled around us in the cold wind, I realized something that took me completely by surprise. This wasn't an ending. This was a reckoning. A moment where the ghosts of my past collided with the reality of my present. A moment where the choices I had made, the life I had built with Jake, the family I had torn apart, the woman I had become, had brought me to this point. To this fork in the road, where everything I had worked for, everything I had hoped for, was now laid out in front of me, as fragile and uncertain as the flowers my ex-husband was holding. Who should I choose? Jake, with his fire and his chaos, the man who had pulled me into a world of passion and scandal, a love so consuming it felt like we were drowning together in the flames. A love that had burned so brightly I couldn't see the danger in it until it was already too late. A love that might destroy everything I had left. Or my ex-husband with his quiet strength, his steady presence. He was the man who could give me stability, the chance for forgiveness, a path to rebuild what we once had, to give our son the kind of family he deserved. A man who had made mistakes just like I had, but who was still standing here, offering me a second chance. Or should I choose myself? To walk away from both of them, to find my own way forward, to stop living for the men who had defined my life and start living for me. The woman I had become. 6 months had passed since everything burned, since our world shattered. 6 months since the courtroom had swallowed me whole. The air inside that sterile, cold room had smelled like stale coffee and regret, the kind of regret that lingered in the air long after you'd said the words you couldn't take back. I adjusted the collar of my blouse, which felt too tight, suffocating like everything else in my life these days. My lawyer slid a piece of paper across the table, her eyes careful, but there was no mistaking the finality in her voice. "Full custody to Daniel's father," she said softly, her words sinking into me like a stone. "With supervised visitation only." Across from me, my ex-husband sat, his face unreadable, refusing to meet my gaze. I couldn't tell if it was anger, pain, or just resignation in his eyes. Beside him, Daniel, my sweet boy, my baby, stared at the wall, as though I wasn't even there. As though I was already a ghost, fading from his life, from his heart. Jake wasn't here. I blinked, and for a moment I was back there. Back to the night everything fell apart. The night I finally exploded. The night I couldn't keep pretending any longer. "You knew this would happen." I had screamed at him, the words ripping out of me like claws. I hurled the framed photo of Daniel's high school graduation at him. The glass shattered against the wall beside Jake's head, the sound like a gunshot in the silence of our home. "You selfish, reckless." My voice cracked. "I love you." Jake's roar shook the windows, rattled the foundation of the life we had built together. "Was that supposed to be a secret?" he had yelled back, his face twisted with a kind of pain I had never seen before. The words hung in the air between us like a heavy, unspoken truth. We had both known. We had both seen it coming. Present day. The gavel slammed down, its crack like a thunderclap, reverberating through the courtroom with an impact that seemed to vibrate in my chest. "Case dismissed." The words hung in the air, as if they were meant to absolve me of something, though I knew they never would. I left the courthouse in a daze, a dull ache thrumming in my chest. The rain had started just as the verdict was read, its cold droplets smacking against my face as if nature itself was punishing me. The October wind bit at my skin, whipping my damp hair into tangled knots, and I felt a strange mixture of numbness and rawness, as if the world was determined to make me feel every ounce of regret I had ever buried. And then I saw him. He was leaning against his truck, the familiar sight of him in that damn leather jacket, worn and faded, like a piece of the past that I couldn't shake. The years had aged him more than I would have expected. his face carrying the weight of regret and decisions I hadn't yet made. His eyes locked with mine, that same intensity that had once ignited something inside me, but now all I felt was a hollow ache. "Lisa," he said, his voice rough, the rain running down his stubbled jaw, tracing the lines of his face like a trail of forgotten memories. I wanted to lick the rain off his skin, taste the bitterness of everything we had lost. But there was so much anger there, so much hurt, that all I wanted to do was slap him and run away. "You shouldn't be here." My voice was barely a whisper, drained of all emotion, dead and hollow. Sounded like someone else's. Jake pushed off the truck, his boots splashing through the puddles, the sound like thunder in the quiet chaos of the storm. His face was stormed with determination, but there was a rawness to his eyes, a desperation that felt too familiar. "I got accepted to firefighter training in Colorado," he said. His words heavy, like he was asking me to come back to a version of life I didn't recognize anymore. A laugh bubbled up from deep within me. Hysterical, broken, a laugh that tasted like sorrow and betrayal. "So this is goodbye." My voice cracked on the words, the weight of everything I had just walked away from crashing down on me. It wasn't just him, wasn't just the past. It was the life I thought I had left behind, the life that had once felt like home. But home was a lie. "Come with me," Jake said, his hands reaching for me with urgency, fingers trembling as they framed my face. His calloused thumbs wiped away the rain and my mascara, leaving streaks of black that mirrored the tears I hadn't cried yet. "Fuck this town, fuck the past. Just us. Starting over." I closed my eyes, and in that brief moment, a flood of memories hit me with the force of a tidal wave. I saw Daniel's face at 8 years old, sticky with popsicle juice, eyes wide with trust and innocence. I saw Jake's smile the first time he made love to me, the rawness of that moment and the fire that had once burned between us. But then came the emptiness, the hollow echoes of wine bottles scattered around lonely beds, of empty promises that lingered in the dark. When I opened my eyes again, I knew what I had to do. The choice was clear. 1 year later, the mountain air was crisp, the morning silence save for the shriek of the firehouse alarm at 3 a.m. It cut through the stillness like a knife, and I stirred in our borrowed bed, the sheets cold against my skin. I watched Jake move with practiced efficiency as he yanked on his gear, every movement sharp and purposeful. But just before he left, as he did every time, he paused at the door and looked back at me. His eyes softened, and his hand reached out to gently press a kiss to the curve of my pregnant belly, the one thing in this wild new life that felt undeniably real. "Love you both," he whispered, his voice a low hum that disappeared into the darkness of the night. He stepped out the door, and I heard his boots crunching on the snow-covered ground as the first flakes of winter began to fall. The world was changing around us, but in this moment, it felt like the storm outside had mirrored the one inside my heart, heavy, uncertain, but with a quiet promise that I wasn't ready to hear. Somewhere back east, there was a son who might never forgive me, whose face would always hold the shadow of abandonment. Somewhere in this wild new life, there would be a phone that would never ring, never carry the apology I so desperately craved. But here, in this place where fire and ash were the only constants, there was peace. There was the sense of belonging that had eluded me for so long. Here there was Jake, but there was also the true end. The end of everything I had known, everything I had once believed in. The fire that could burn it all down. Was it the right ending? Would it ever be? Fire for more raw emotional stories. Smash that subscribe button. Leave a love letter in the comments below. Would you have followed Jake into the unknown, leaving behind everything you knew for the promise of something new? Would you have chosen the fire,